The phone rang at 2:47 a.m., cutting through my sleep like a rusty blade. In my line of work, late-night calls usually meant someone's security system had failed or some corporate executive needed a bodyguard for his mistress. What I didn't expect was Chief Morales's gravelly voice delivering news that would turn my world inside out. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Rafael, you need to get down here. It's about Camila. My sister's name hit me like ice water. I sat up in bed, instantly alert. 20 years of tactical training doesn't just disappear because you hang up your badge and start a private security firm. What happened? There was an attack. The restaurant. Rafael, I'm sorry. Camila and Hector are gone. Gone. Such a clean word for something so messy. I looked over at Marisol, still sleeping peacefully in our king-sized bed, her dark hair spread across the silk pillowcase like spilled wine. She hadn't stirred. Nothing ever seemed to wake my wife these days. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, already reaching for my clothes. The drive through downtown gave me time to think, which was the last thing I wanted. Camila's restaurant, Casa Esperanza, had been struggling lately. The neighborhood wasn't what it used to be, and foot traffic had been declining for months. But Camila was stubborn, just like our father. She'd rather serve beans and rice to empty tables than admit defeat. The crime scene was a nightmare wrapped in yellow tape. Police cars lined the street, their red and blue lights painting the brick buildings in alternating colors of bruise. I'd seen plenty of crime scenes during my 15 years with the force, but this was different. This was personal. Chief Morales met me at the perimeter, his weathered face grim in the fluorescent streetlight. We'd worked together for over a decade before I went private. He knew how to read me better than most. Gang hit, he said without preamble. 3 men, in and out fast. Took the register, but that wasn't the point. They were sending a message. What kind of message? The kind that says, pay up or else. Your sister owed money to some bad people, Rafael. Protection money. I stared at the shattered front window of Casa Esperanza, glass fragments glittering on the sidewalk like fallen stars. Camila never mentioned any protection racket. Pride runs in your family. She probably thought she could handle it herself. Inside the restaurant, the scene was worse. Tables overturned, chairs scattered, and in the kitchen where Camila and Hector had spent 15 years building their dream, 2 chalk outlines marked the end of everything they'd worked for. They fought back, Morales said, following my gaze. Hector had a knife in his hand. Camila was trying to call for help when they got to her. My hands clenched into fists. In the old days, I would have been the one hunting these animals down. Now I was just another civilian, standing in the wreckage of my family's life. Any leads? Working on it. But Rafael... Morales paused, choosing his words carefully. These aren't street kids looking for drug money. This was professional, organized. Someone with real power wanted your sister to pay, and when she couldn't... He didn't need to finish. I understood the language of violence better than most. This wasn't random. This was business. I spent another hour at the scene, memorizing details, asking questions that Morales couldn't or wouldn't answer. By the time I got home, dawn was creeping over the horizon, painting our boutique hotel in shades of gold and amber. The Palacio Ortega had been Marisol's dream when we bought it 5 years ago. A restored Victorian mansion converted into an elegant 12-room hotel, complete with antique furnishings and a reputation for discretion. It should have been our ticket to financial independence. Instead, it had become a beautiful money pit that drained our savings faster than we could fill it. I found Marisol in the kitchen, already dressed in one of her expensive business suits, sipping coffee from our finest china. She looked up when I entered, her expression shifting from mild curiosity to practiced concern. "Where were you?" I woke up and you were gone. Camila's gone. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Marisol's perfectly manicured hand froze halfway to her lips, coffee cup suspended in space. What? How? I told her everything Morales had shared, watching her face for reactions. Shock, certainly. Sadness, appropriately displayed. But something else flickered behind her dark eyes, something I couldn't quite identify. Oh, Rafael, I'm so sorry. What can I do? Nothing right now. I need to make arrangements. Contact Luz. Our niece was studying law in Boston, probably still asleep in her dorm room, unaware that her world had just collapsed. Marisol nodded, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her skin was soft, moisturized, unmarked by the kind of work that had defined Camila's life. Take all the time you need. The hotel can manage itself for a few days. Could it? I wondered. Our occupancy rate had been declining for months, and our best customers seemed to be businessmen who paid in cash and never stayed more than a few hours. I'd started to suspect that our boutique hotel was developing a reputation for services that went beyond hospitality. But that was a problem for another day. Right now, I had a funeral to plan and a niece to comfort. The hunt for my sister's killers would have to wait, or so I thought. 3 days later, while cleaning out Camila's apartment above the restaurant, I found the first piece of the puzzle. Tucked inside a cookbook, between recipes for mole and tamales, was a collection of terrible photographs. The pictures showed Marisol entering and leaving various locations around the city: a downtown office building, an upscale restaurant, a luxury condominium complex on the waterfront. But it was the last photo that stopped my heart. Marisol and City Councilman Mateo Ruiz, locked in an embrace outside the Marriott downtown. The timestamp showed the photo was taken 2 weeks ago, the same night Marisol had told me she was visiting her sick aunt in Portland. I sat on Camila's threadbare couch, staring at the evidence of my wife's betrayal, trying to process what it meant. Why had my sister been following Marisol, and why hadn't she told me what she'd discovered? My phone buzzed. A text from Tomas, my right-hand man at Ortega Security. Boss, you need to see something. Meet me at the office. The converted firehouse that served as our headquarters was only 10 minutes away, but it felt like an eternity. My mind raced through possibilities, connections, implications. Nothing good. Thomas was waiting with a laptop and a grim expression. At 28, he had the kind of military bearing that never quite fades, even in civilian clothes. We'd worked together for 3 years, ever since he'd gotten out of the Marines and needed a job that didn't involve a desk. What have you got? I asked. I've been digging into the protection racket angle like you asked, found something interesting. He turned the laptop screen toward me. Your sister wasn't the only business owner getting squeezed. There's been a pattern over the past 6 months. Small businesses, family-owned places, all in the same general area. The screen showed a map of downtown with red pins marking affected locations. Casa Esperanza was just one of a dozen. Here's the thing, Tomas continued. Every single one of these businesses is in an area that's been targeted for redevelopment. The city's been trying to buy them out for months, but the owners won't sell. So someone decided to help the city along? That's what it looks like. And guess who's been the most vocal supporter of the downtown redevelopment project? I didn't need to guess. I could see it in Thomas's expression, feel it in the pit of my stomach. Mateo Ruiz. Bingo. He's been pushing this project hard, talking about bringing jobs and prosperity to the area. But here's what's interesting. His construction company, Ruiz Development, has the inside track on most of the contracts. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Mateo Ruiz, ambitious city councilman, with his eye on the mayor's office. My wife, desperate to save our failing hotel, willing to do whatever it took. And my sister, caught in the middle, probably trying to protect me from a truth that would destroy everything. There's more, Thomas said, I checked the hotel's financial records like you asked. We've got some unusual activity over the past few months. He pulled up another screen, this one showing our bank statements. Regular deposits, most of them small amounts from legitimate guests. But scattered throughout were larger cash deposits, always on weekdays, always in round numbers. 500 here, 1,000 there. It adds up to about 15 grand over 3 months. Way more than our actual room revenue should generate. I studied the dates, cross-referencing them with my memory. Most of them corresponded to days when I'd been out of town on security jobs, leaving Marisol to manage the hotel alone. Any idea what these deposits represent? I've got a theory, but you're not going to like it. Thomas pulled up a series of credit card receipts. These are charges from the hotel restaurant and bar. Look at the timestamps. The receipts showed purchases made during business hours, but for amounts that didn't match our actual menu prices. A $50 charge for coffee, a $100 charge for a sandwich. Either we were serving the most expensive food in the state, or these charges were covering something else entirely. Money laundering? Or payment for services not listed on the menu? Boss, I think your wife has been running some kind of operation out of the hotel, and I think Councilman Ruiz is one of her best customers. The room seemed to tilt around me. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my business, was crumbling like a house built on sand. Marisol hadn't just been cheating on me, she'd been using our hotel as a front for illegal activities, and somehow that had gotten my sister killed. I need to see the guest registry, I said. Thomas was already ahead of me, pulling up digital copies of our check-in records. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Guests who stayed for only a few hours, payments always in cash, names that were obviously fake, John Smith, Mike Jones, Robert Johnson. But one name appeared more frequently than the others, always booking our most expensive suite, always staying exactly 3 hours, always on Wednesday afternoons. Marcus Valdez. Run that name, I told Thomas. His fingers flew over the keyboard. Within minutes, he had an answer. Fake ID. The credit card is registered to a shell company, but I can trace it back to its source. More typing. Well, I'll be damned. What? The shell company is owned by another shell company, which is owned by Ruiz Development. So there it was. Mateo Ruiz had been using my hotel for his private meetings, probably with his co-conspirators in the protection racket. My wife had been facilitating it, taking his money, lying to my face about everything, and my sister had found out. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I didn't go home that night. Instead, I sat in my office, staring at the evidence spread across my desk like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that formed a picture of betrayal. The photos of Marisol and Mateo, the financial records showing our hotel being used as a front, the connection between the protection racket and the redevelopment project. By morning, I had a plan. Mateo Ruiz lived in a glass and steel tower overlooking the harbor, the kind of place that screamed new money and political ambition. Getting past the doorman required a combination of my old police credentials and a story about investigating threats against the councilman. Security guards are trained to be suspicious, but they're also trained to cooperate with law enforcement. The elevator to the penthouse floor gave me time to think about what I was going to do. The smart play would be to take everything to Chief Morales, let the system handle it. But the system moved slowly, and politicians had ways of making evidence disappear. I wanted answers, and I wanted them now. Mateo answered his door in a silk bathrobe and slippers, clearly not expecting visitors at 7 in the morning. His face went through a series of expressions when he saw me: confusion, recognition, and finally, fear. Rafael, what are you doing here? We need to talk, Councilman. I pushed past him into the apartment, taking in the expensive furniture, the original artwork, the panoramic view of the city. This was what corruption bought you, a life of luxury built on other people's misery. Look, if this is about your sister, I'm sorry for your loss, but I don't see what that has to do with me. I turned to face him, letting him see the anger in my eyes. Cut the shit, Mateo. I know about the protection racket. I know about the redevelopment scam. And I know about you and my wife. His face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Marcus Valdez, ring any bells? Or should I call you by your real name when you're screwing my wife in my own hotel? The fight went out of him all at once, like air escaping from a punctured balloon. He sank into a leather chair, suddenly looking older than his 50 years. It's not what you think. Really? Because what I think is that you've been running a protection racket to force small business owners to sell their property so your development company can buy it cheap. When my sister wouldn't play along, you had her killed, and somewhere along the way, you seduced my wife into helping you launder money through our hotel. I never ordered anyone killed. The words exploded out of him. That wasn't supposed to happen. But you knew it was a possibility. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the harbor. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. The protection thing, that was already happening. Local gangs squeezing business owners. Nothing new. I just redirected their efforts, made sure they focused on properties I needed for the project. And when the owners wouldn't sell, most of them did, after a few broken windows, some vandalism, they were happy to take whatever offer I made. He looked up at me, and I saw something that might have been regret in his eyes. Your sister was different. She fought back. So you had her killed? No. I told them to back off, that she wasn't worth the trouble. But the gang, they don't like being told what to do. They decided to make an example. I wanted to hit him. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to grab him by the throat and squeeze until he told me everything. But I needed information more than I needed satisfaction. What about Marisol? That started later. She approached me, said she knew what was happening, and wanted in. Your hotel was perfect for meetings, discreet, upscale, no questions asked. I paid her well for the privilege. And the affair? He had the grace to look ashamed. That just happened. She's a beautiful woman, and she was lonely. You were always working, always focused on your security business. She needed attention. So you gave it to her. We gave each other what we needed. I needed a safe place to conduct business. She needed money to keep the hotel afloat. The rest was just a bonus. I walked to the window, looking out at the city I'd spent my adult life protecting. From up here it looked clean and orderly, a place where good people could build good lives. But I knew better. I'd seen what lurked in the shadows, the predators who fed on weakness and desperation. Here's what's going to happen, I said, turning back to Mateo. You're going to confess, all of it. The protection racket, the development scam, the money laundering. You're going to make sure the people responsible for my sister's passing are brought to justice. I can't do that. You don't understand the forces involved here. These aren't just local gangsters. There are people in city government, in law enforcement, who are part of this. If I talk, I'm finished. If you don't talk, you'll be no better off. Something in my voice must have convinced him I wasn't bluffing. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What do you want me to do? First, you're going to call off the protection racket. Every business owner in that district gets left alone from now on. Second, you're going to use your influence to make sure my sister's killers are caught and prosecuted. Third, you're going to stay away from my wife. And if I do all that, then maybe you get to keep breathing. It wasn't much of a deal from his perspective, but it was better than the alternative. He agreed to my terms, though I could see in his eyes that he was already planning ways to break them. That was fine. I was planning ahead, too. I got home to find Marisol in our private office, hunched over the hotel's financial records with a calculator and a worried expression. She looked up when I entered, and I saw guilt flash across her face before she could hide it. Where have you been? I was worried. Making arrangements for Camila's funeral. The lie came easily. I'd had plenty of practice lately, it seemed. Of course. I should have realized. She stood and moved toward me, arms outstretched for an embrace that I suddenly couldn't bear. Don't. The single word stopped her cold. Rafael? What's wrong? I know about Mateo. The color drained from her face, but she tried to maintain the pretense. I don't know what you mean. I've seen the photos, Marisol. I know about the money laundering, the fake guests, all of it. I pulled out the pictures Camila had hidden and spread them across the desk. My sister died trying to protect me from the truth about what you've become. She stared at the evidence for a long moment, then sank into her chair like a marionette with cut strings. How long have you known? Does it matter? The question is how long it's been going on. 6 months. Her voice was barely audible. It started as just business. The hotel was failing, Rafael. We were 3 months behind on the mortgage. The utilities were about to be shut off. When Mateo approached me with a proposition, I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Is there? You were never here, always off playing bodyguard to some corporate executive or investigating insurance fraud. I was alone, trying to keep our dream alive while you chased other people's problems. So you decided to become a criminal. I decided to survive. The words exploded out of her with surprising force. Do you know what it's like to watch everything you've worked for slip away while your husband acts like it doesn't matter? This hotel is my life, Rafael. I wasn't going to let it die. And the affair? She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft and broken. I was lonely. You were never here, never really present even when you were. Mateo made me feel wanted, important, like I mattered to someone. You mattered to me. Did I? When was the last time we had dinner together? When was the last time you asked me about my day, my dreams, my fears? You treated me like part of the furniture, Rafael. Beautiful, expensive furniture that you were proud to own but never really thought about. Her words hit harder than I expected. There was truth in them, painful truth that I didn't want to acknowledge. I had been distant, focused on building my security business while our marriage slowly crumbled. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. My sister is gone because of your choices. That's not fair. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. When Mateo told me about the protection racket, I told him it was wrong. I tried to convince him to find another way. But you didn't try hard enough to walk away. No, she admitted. I didn't. Because I was scared of losing everything we'd built together. Instead, you lost everything we were together. The words hung between us. Marisol began to cry, quiet tears that traced silver lines down her cheeks. What happens now? Now you're going to help me bring down the whole operation. Mateo, his partners in city government, the gang members who killed Camila, all of them. I can't do that. You don't understand what these people are capable of. I understand perfectly. I also understand what I'm capable of when someone hurts my family. Something in my tone made her look up, and I saw fear replace the sadness in her eyes. Rafael, what are you planning? Justice. The kind that doesn't depend on corrupt courts or bought politicians. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. Because if you don't help me, you're going to find out just how scary I can be. It wasn't a threat, exactly. More like a promise. And from the look on her face, she understood the difference. Over the next hour, I extracted every detail she knew about the operation. Names, dates, locations, methods. The picture that emerged was even worse than I'd imagined. The protection racket was just one part of a larger criminal enterprise that included drug trafficking, illegal gambling, and political corruption that reached into the highest levels of city government. My sister had stumbled into something much bigger and more dangerous than a simple extortion scheme. She'd discovered a conspiracy that could bring down half the city's power structure, and they'd killed her for it. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd left me alive. The next morning, I called a meeting with my closest friends, people I'd known for years, trusted with my life, considered family. Tom Bradley, my former partner on the police force, Jennifer Walsh, a federal prosecutor who'd worked with me on several cases, Mike Santos, a private investigator who'd helped me start my security business. I'd expected them to be outraged on my behalf, ready to help me bring down the people responsible for Camila's passing. What I got instead was a room full of uncomfortable silence and averted eyes. "Let me get this straight," Tom said after I'd laid out everything I'd discovered. "You want us to help you take down a city councilman, several high-ranking police officials, and a criminal organization with connections throughout the government." "That's right. Based on evidence you obtained through breaking and entering, threatening a public official, and coercing your wife. The evidence is solid. The evidence is inadmissible. Even if we could prove half of what you're claiming, it would never hold up in court." Jennifer leaned forward, her expression sympathetic but firm. "Rafael, I understand you're grieving. What happened to Camila was terrible, but you can't just declare war on the entire power structure of the city." "Why not?" "They declared war on my family first." "Because that's not how the system works," Mike said. "You're talking about vigilante justice, and that's a road that leads nowhere good. The system failed my sister. The system is corrupt from top to bottom. If I don't do something, who will?" "The FBI," Jennifer said. "There are federal agencies that investigate this kind of corruption. Let me make some calls, see what I can do." "How long will that take? Months? Years? Meanwhile, the people who killed Camila walk free, and more innocent business owners get squeezed or worse." "That's how justice works, Rafael. It's slow, but it's thorough. It's not justice if it never happens." The room fell silent again. I could see them exchanging glances, having a conversation without words. Finally, Tom spoke up. "We can't help you with this, buddy. Not the way you want to do it." "Then how?" "Turn everything over to internal affairs. Let them handle the corrupt cops. Give Jennifer what she needs to start a federal investigation. Work within the system. The system that let my sister gone. The system that's our best hope." I looked around the room at these people I'd called friends, seeing them clearly for the first time. They were good people, honest people, but they were also people who'd never had everything they loved ripped away from them. They could afford to be patient, to trust in procedures and protocols. I couldn't. "I understand your position," I said, standing up. "I hope you'll understand mine." "Rafael, don't do anything stupid," Tom said. "You're not a cop anymore. You don't have immunity or backup. If you go after these people on your own, you'll end up seriously injured or in prison." "Maybe, but at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror." I left them sitting there, probably already planning how to distance themselves from whatever I was going to do next. I couldn't blame them. They had careers to protect, families to think about, futures that didn't include being associated with a rogue ex-cop on a revenge mission. But their abandonment stung more than I wanted to admit. These were people who'd stood with me through 15 years of police work, who'd celebrated my marriage, who'd helped me start my business. Now, when I needed them most, they were walking away. Fine. I'd done harder things with less support. Back at the office, Thomas was waiting with more bad news. 3 more businesses hit last night, he said, showing me police reports he'd obtained through contacts who were still willing to talk. A bakery, a dry cleaner, and a hardware store. Same pattern. Masked men, professional job, message delivered. Anyone hurt? The baker's in the hospital with a broken arm. His wife's traumatized but alive. The others got smart and didn't resist. I studied the locations on a map. All of them were in the redevelopment zone, all of them owned by families who'd been holding out against pressure to sell. "It's escalating," I said. "Looks like it. Word is that Mateo's getting pressure from his partners to wrap this up quickly. The longer it drags on, the more chance there is of federal attention." then we need to move faster. We? I looked at my young associate, this former Marine who'd followed me out of loyalty and respect. I can't ask you to do this, Thomas. It's not your fight, and it's going to get dangerous. With respect, boss, that's bullshit. These bastards killed your sister, corrupted your wife, and turned your friends against you. If that's not worth fighting for, I don't know what is. You could lose everything. Your job, your future, maybe your life. I've been in worse places with worse odds. At least this time I know I'm fighting for something that matters. His loyalty was humbling and terrifying at the same time. I was about to drag this young man into a war that could destroy us both, and he was volunteering to follow me into hell. All right then, let's go to war. The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. We were going to dismantle Mateo's entire operation piece by piece, starting with the street-level enforcers and working our way up to the man himself. But we weren't going to kill anyone or break any laws that would land us in prison for life. This was going to be surgical, precise, and devastating. Our first target was the gang that had been carrying out the protection racket. Tomas had identified their headquarters, a warehouse in the industrial district where they stored stolen goods and conducted their business. More importantly, he'd discovered that they kept detailed records of their activities, including payments received and orders given. Insurance, Thomas explained. These guys don't trust each other, so they document everything. If one of them gets arrested, he's got leverage to negotiate a better deal. Which means they've got evidence that could bring down the whole conspiracy. Exactly. We get those records, we've got enough to bury Mateo and his partners. The warehouse was guarded but not heavily, 3 men during the day, 2 at night, all of them more concerned with keeping people out than keeping evidence in. We waited until 3 a.m., when human alertness is naturally at its lowest, then made our move. I'd forgotten how much I missed this, the careful planning, the adrenaline rush, the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. The guards were professionals, but they weren't expecting an assault by someone with my training. Tomas created a distraction at the front entrance while I went in through a skylight, rappelling down into the main warehouse space like something out of an action movie. The office was in the back, protected by a steel door and an electronic lock that took me less than 2 minutes to bypass. Inside, I found exactly what we were looking for: filing cabinets full of records, computers with encrypted files, and a safe containing cash and more documents. But the real treasure was a ledger book that detailed every aspect of the protection operation. Names, amounts, dates, and most importantly, a record of orders received from Mr. Mateo Ruiz, including the order to make an example of Casa Esperanza. I photographed everything, copied computer files to a portable drive, and took the original ledger. By the time the guards realized what was happening, we were gone, vanishing into the night like ghosts. The next morning, copies of the most damaging documents were delivered to every major news outlet in the city, along with a detailed explanation of what they represented. By noon, the story was front-page news. By evening, federal investigators were opening an inquiry. Mateo's response was swift and predictable. He called a press conference to deny everything, claiming the documents were forgeries created by his political enemies. But the evidence was too detailed, too specific to dismiss easily. And when reporters started asking questions about his relationship with the gang members, about the convenient timing of the protection racket and the redevelopment project, his denials began to sound hollow. The gang's response was more direct. They came looking for whoever had robbed them, and they weren't interested in asking polite questions. I was ready for them. The attack came at dawn, 6 men with guns and bad intentions. They expected to find a middle-aged ex-cop running a small security business. What they found instead was a tactical expert who'd spent 20 years preparing for exactly this kind of fight. The battle was brief, but intense. I'd prepared the firehouse like a fortress, with defensive positions, weapons caches, and escape routes planned in advance. When they came through the front door, they walked into a killing zone. I didn't kill them. I'm not a murderer, whatever else I might be. But I made sure they understood that coming after me was a mistake they wouldn't want to repeat. By the time the police arrived, 3 of them were unconscious, 2 were crying, and 1 was begging me not to hurt him anymore. The message was clear. Rafael Ortega was not an easy target, but the real message was delivered that afternoon when photos of the aftermath appeared on social media along with a simple statement. This is what happens to people who threaten innocent families. The protection racket is over. Anyone who says otherwise can discuss it with me personally. Within hours, business owners throughout the district were reporting that their tormentors had suddenly lost interest in collecting protection money. The word was out. The game had changed, and the rules were now being written by someone who played for keeps. Mateo tried one more gambit, reaching out through intermediaries to negotiate a truce. He was willing to end the protection racket, to abandon the redevelopment project, to do whatever it took to make this go away. My response was simple: too late. Because this was never just about stopping the protection racket. This was about justice for my sister, about accountability for the people who'd destroyed my family and corrupted my wife. And justice, real justice, required more than just stopping the crime. It required punishment for the criminals. The final phase of my plan was the most dangerous, because it required me to come out of the shadows and face my enemies directly. But it was also the most necessary, because some things can only be settled face to face, man to man, with no intermediaries or negotiations. It was time to end this. The meeting was set for midnight at the old pier, a location that offered privacy and multiple escape routes for both sides. Mateo came with 2 bodyguards, probably thinking he could intimidate me into backing down. I came alone, which probably made him think I was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. He was about to find out which. "Rafael," he said, as we approached each other across the weathered planks of the pier, "I'm glad you agreed to meet. I think we can work something out that benefits everyone. The only thing that would benefit everyone is if you confessed to your crimes and turned yourself in. That's not going to happen, but I can make other arrangements. The protection racket is finished. I've already called it off. The redevelopment project is being shelved. Your sister's killers will be arrested and prosecuted. Isn't that enough? No. Then what do you want? I want you to pay for what you did. I want you to face the consequences of your choices. I want justice." "Justice?" He laughed, a bitter sound that carried across the water. "You think this is about justice? This is about revenge, pure and simple? You're angry about your sister, angry about your wife, angry about your friends abandoning you, so you've decided to take it out on me. You're right about one thing. I am angry, but this is still about justice." "Whose justice? Yours. You're not a judge or a jury, Rafael. You're just a man with a gun and a grudge." Sometimes that's enough. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of sirens in the distance, growing louder as they approached. Mateo smiled, thinking he'd outmaneuvered me. "I called the police before I came. Told them you'd threatened to kill me, that you were unstable and dangerous. They'll be here any minute." "I know. I called them too." His smile faded. "What?" "I told them I had evidence of a conspiracy involving a city councilman, and that I was meeting with a key witness who was ready to confess. They'll be very interested in what you have to say." "I'm not confessing to anything." "You already did." I held up a small recording device, the red light blinking steadily. Everything we'd said, including his admission that he'd called off the protection racket and knew who had killed my sister, was now preserved for posterity. "You son of a jerk." Actually, my mother was a saint. It was my wife who turned out to be something else entirely. The police cars were getting closer, their lights visible now through the fog that was rolling in from the harbor. Mateo looked around desperately, probably calculating his chances of escape. "Don't even think about it," I said. "There's nowhere to run. This isn't over." "Yes, it is." The first police car pulled onto the pier, followed by two more, and an unmarked sedan that I recognized as belonging to the FBI. Jennifer had apparently made those calls after all, and federal investigators had been building their case while I was conducting my personal war. Chief Morales got out of the lead car, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. Behind him came two federal agents in dark suits, their expressions professionally neutral. "Rafael," Morales said, "are you all right?" "I'm fine. Councilman Ruiz has something he'd like to tell you." Mateo tried to maintain his composure, but I could see the panic in his eyes. "I'm not saying anything without my lawyer." "That's your right," one of the federal agents said, "but we have enough evidence to arrest you with or without a confession. Conspiracy, racketeering, money laundering, accessory to murder, the charges are going to keep coming." As they led Mateo away in handcuffs, he looked back at me one last time. "This won't bring your sister back." "No," I agreed, "but it'll make sure she didn't die for nothing." The next few hours were a blur of statements, evidence review, and debriefings. The federal agents were impressed with the quality of the intelligence I'd gathered, though they weren't entirely happy with my methods. The recording of Mateo's admissions, combined with the documents from the warehouse and Marisol's testimony, would be enough to dismantle the entire conspiracy. By dawn, arrests were being made throughout the city. Gang members, corrupt police officials, city council members, construction company executives. The web of corruption was larger than anyone had imagined, but it was finally being torn apart. I found Marisol waiting for me at home, sitting in our kitchen with a cup of coffee and a suitcase by her feet. "It's over," I said. "I know. I saw the news." She looked up at me, her eyes red from crying. "What happens now?" "Now you testify against your co-conspirators and hope the federal prosecutor is feeling generous." I meant with us. I sat down across from her, studying the face I'd loved for 10 years, trying to find some trace of the woman I'd married. She was still beautiful, still elegant, but something essential had been lost along the way. "There is no us anymore, Marisol. There hasn't been for a long time. I know I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but we could try to rebuild, start over somewhere else. Some things can't be rebuilt. Some betrayals can't be forgiven." She nodded, accepting what she'd probably known all along. "I never meant for Camila to get hurt." "But she did get hurt. She got killed because of choices you made, roads you decided to walk down. That's something you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. And you? What are you going to live with?" I thought about that for a moment. The knowledge that I did everything I could to make things right, that when my family needed me, I didn't let them down. Even if it cost you everything else? Everything else was already gone. I just didn't want to admit it. She left an hour later, driving away in her expensive car toward an uncertain future. I watched from the window until she was out of sight, then turned back to the empty house that had once been our dream. The hotel would have to be sold, of course. It was evidence in a federal case now, and even if it wasn't, I couldn't afford to keep it running. The security business would probably survive. There was always a market for someone who could get results, even if his methods were unconventional. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was that the people responsible for my sister's passing were going to pay for their crimes. What mattered was that other families wouldn't have to go through what mine had endured. What mattered was that justice, real justice, had finally been served. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table where Marisol and I had shared so many meals, so many conversations, so many dreams that had turned to dust. Outside, the sun was rising over the harbor, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was going to be a beautiful day.